The crack of a rifle echoed through the quiet valley as Lieutenant Maria Reyes crouched behind a fallen tree, her hands steady on the weapon she'd been cleaning just minutes before. What happened in the next hour would reveal a talent she'd kept, hidden for 5 years, and prove that some skills remain razor-sharp, even when buried beneath layers of deliberate anonymity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maria Reyes was exactly where she wanted to be invisible. For the past 3 years, she'd served as a logistics specialist with the 75th Ranger Battalion, deployed to a remote outpost in the mountains of Afghanistan. With her dark hair always pulled back in a regulation bun and her small frame often concealed beneath standard-issue fatigues, she blended seamlessly into the background operations of the military base. Her fellow soldiers knew her as the quiet specialist who'd enlisted after college, the one who kept the supply chain running with uncanny efficiency, but never spoke about her past. She arrived early, worked diligently, and retired to her quarters without socializing beyond what was necessary. No one questioned why someone so young had such an intuitive understanding of ballistic trajectories, or why she occasionally corrected senior officers on matters of long-range operations with an authority that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than training manuals. Maria preferred it that way. She'd spent the last 5 years carefully constructing this unremarkable identity, learning to suppress the instincts that had once made her exceptional. When she watched the battalion's designated marksmen practicing on the range, she forced herself to look away, to ignore the familiar ache in her chest that reminded her of who she used to be. This morning had started like any other at Forward Operating Base Sentinel. She was performing inventory on medical supplies, checking expiration dates with the methodical precision that made her supervisors trust her with the base's most critical logistics. The work was satisfying in its simplicity, predictable problems with predictable solutions. Nothing like the split-second calculations and impossible shots that had once defined her existence. Her commanding officer, Captain James Mitchell, approached her workstation, carrying a tablet and wearing the expression of someone dealing with an unexpected crisis. At 40, Mitchell was a career military man who'd seen enough emergencies to know when something was seriously wrong. "Reyes," he called, his voice tense with stress. "We need to talk." Maria looked up from the inventory sheet, setting down her clipboard with practiced calm. "What's wrong, sir?" "We've got a situation developing," Mitchell said, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. Operation Sandstorm was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance mission. 2 squads, standard patrol through the Eastern Valley. Maria nodded, not understanding why this concerned her. The reconnaissance teams trained regularly, and their operations rarely involved logistics personnel beyond equipment preparation. 20 minutes ago, we lost contact with Alpha Team," Mitchell continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Drone footage shows they're pinned down by insurgents in the mountain pass. Bravo Team is trying to reach them, but they're taking heavy fire." The familiar knot of anxiety that Maria had learned to ignore began forming in her stomach. "What kind of problem requires logistics involvement, sir?" "The extraction isn't just about personnel," Mitchell said grimly. "Alpha Team located the weapons cache we've been tracking for months. High-value intelligence on the regional cell's operations. If they don't make it out with that intel..." Mitchell didn't finish the sentence, but Maria understood the implications. "So what does that have to do with me?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. Mitchell's expression grew somber. "Our designated marksman took shrapnel to his shooting hand during the initial engagement. The team needs long-range support to break the insurgent position, but our backup is on leave." Maria felt her carefully constructed world beginning to shift beneath her feet. "I still don't understand what this has to do with logistics, sir." "It doesn't," Mitchell said quietly. But it has everything to do with the fact that we need someone who can make an impossible shot at a moment's notice. And our backup marksman is 3 days away on R&R in Dubai. The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She took a step backward, shaking her head instinctively. I'm a logistics specialist, Captain. I don't do combat operations. Mitchell studied her face with the intensity of someone who'd spent decades reading people. Funny thing, Reyes, I've been watching you for 3 years. The way you understand ballistics, the way you talk about wind patterns, the way you instinctively correct trajectories when you think no one's looking during weapons maintenance. Maria's hands began to tremble slightly, a reaction she hoped Mitchell wouldn't notice. I just read a lot of field manuals. Maybe, Mitchell said, pulling out his tablet and showing her a series of official documents. Or maybe it has something to do with the fact that when I ran a deeper background check on you this morning, I found some very interesting inconsistencies. The tablet screen showed Maria's enlistment records, training certifications, and educational background. Everything looked normal, exactly as she'd carefully arranged years ago. But Mitchell scrolled to a section she'd never seen before, a series of classified database queries that had been flagged for manual review. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. According to this, Mitchell said quietly, Maria Reyes didn't exist before age 22. No birth records matching your fingerprints, no early education documentation, nothing that links back to the person you claim to be. It's like you materialized out of thin air as a college graduate. Maria's mouth went dry. She'd been so careful, so thorough in creating her new identity, but she'd never considered that someone might look deeper than the standard background checks required for military service. Records get lost, she said weakly. System errors. Database migrations. That's what I thought too, Mitchell interrupted, until I started wondering why a logistics specialist with no formal marksmanship training could spot a half-degree windage adjustment from 50 yards away, or why you maintain your personal rifle with the precision of someone who spent thousands of hours behind a scope. The emergency radio on Mitchell's belt chose that moment to crackle to life with urgent communications from the command center. Captain Mitchell, Alpha Team reports multiple casualties. Extraction window closing in 40 minutes before reinforcements from the nearby village arrive. Need immediate tactical solution. Mitchell looked at Maria with an expression that mixed suspicion, desperation, and something that might have been understanding. Reyes, I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to be straight with me. Have you ever served as a long-range precision shooter? Maria stared at him, feeling the weight of 5 years of carefully maintained lies pressing down on her shoulders. In the distance, she could hear the faint sound of helicopter rotors spinning up for emergency deployment. The sound that had once been the soundtrack to her life, the sound she'd been running from ever since. The next 15 minutes would determine whether Maria's carefully constructed anonymity could survive, or whether the crisis unfolding around them would force her to confront the identity she'd been hiding for over half a decade. Mitchell's radio crackled again, this time with the voice of Colonel Stephen Walker, the base commander. Mitchell, what's the status on that support marksman? We've got men dying out there and a narrow extraction window. Mitchell keyed his RDIO while maintaining eye contact with Maria. Colonel, we're still working on the situation. Work faster, Captain. Every minute we delay decreases the chances of those men coming home. As Mitchell spoke with his superiors, Maria found herself studying the tactical map visible on the command center screens through the open office door. Even from a distance, she could see the red dots indicating enemy positions surrounding the pinned-down Alpha Team. It had been 5 years since she'd looked at a battlefield map like that. 5 years since she'd calculated wind patterns, elevations, and firing solutions. She forced herself to look away, focusing instead on the inventory clipboard she'd been holding when the crisis began. Safe, predictable, grounded. Everything she'd tried to become. "Reyes," Mitchell said, ending his radio. "Conversation. I'm going to tell you what I think is happening here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong." Maria remained silent, her hands unconsciously tightening around the clipboard. "I think you're not who you say you are," Mitchell continued. "I think those gaps in your documentation aren't accidents or bureaucratic oversights. I think you've been deliberately hiding from something or someone for a very long time." The accuracy of his assessment made Maria's chest tighten. She'd underestimated the captain's investigative instincts. "More importantly," Mitchell went on, "I think you have skills that you're not telling us about. Skills that might be exactly what we need right now." Before Maria could respond, Major Robert Turner, the operations officer for the battalion, strode into the logistics office. At 45, Turner had the bearing of someone who'd spent his career in high-stakes situations, and the tension radiating from him was palpable. "Mitchell, please tell me you found us a marksman," Turner said. Without preamble. "We just received intelligence that insurgent reinforcements are moving toward Alpha Team's position. We need someone in position in 20 minutes or this whole operation becomes a recovery mission instead of an extraction." Mitchell glanced at Maria, then back at Turner. "Sir, I may have identified a possible solution, but it's unconventional." Turner followed Mitchell's gaze to Maria, taking in her logistics uniform and clipboard. "Please tell me you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting." "Major," Mitchell said carefully, "what if I told you that Specialist Reyes here might have more combat experience than her current job title indicates?" Maria felt the conversation spiraling beyond her control. "Captain Mitchell, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Have you ever fired a precision rifle in combat conditions?" Turner interrupted, his tone sharp with urgency. The direct question hung in the air between them. Maria could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 5 years of hidden truth pressing against her carefully constructed walls. She could lie, maintain her cover, and watch as good soldiers died. Or she could admit to knowledge that would expose everything she'd been hiding. "Yes," she said quietly, the word escaping before she could stop it. Turner's expression shifted immediately. "What kind of rifle?" Maria closed her eyes, feeling the last of her defenses crumbling. "M24, M405, M110. I've worked with most NATO standard precision systems. How many confirmed engagements?" Turner pressed. "Enough." Turner exchanged a look with Mitchell that spoke volumes about the desperation of their situation. "Specialist Reyes, I'm going to ask you a series of technical questions. Your answers will determine whether we're having a very different conversation in the next 5 minutes." Over the following minutes, Turner rapid-fired questions about ballistic coefficients, environmental factors, and engagement protocols. Despite herself, Maria found herself answering with an authority and precision that made both men stare at her in amazement. Maximum effective range calculation in high altitude, low humidity conditions. Adjust standard tables upward by 3%. Account for thinner air density. Reduce wind drift estimates by 7 to 10% depending on elevation. Adjustment for target movement during a 3-second flight time. Lead the target by twice the apparent visual movement. Incorporate half-value windage adjustment if perpendicular to the firing line, quarter value if at oblique angle. Protocol for concealment after engaging from a compromised position. Displace immediately after the shot, minimum 50 meters, preferably to a prepared secondary position with overlapping fields of fire. Remove all brass, use terrain features to break visual tracking. With each answer, Maria felt pieces of her old identity reasserting themselves. The knowledge was still there, intact after 5 years of forced dormancy. The calculations, the instincts, the split-second decision-making processes that had once defined her. all of it waiting just beneath the surface of her carefully maintained specialist facade. Turner's radio crackled with an update from the command center. Major Turner, drone surveillance shows insurgent reinforcements moving along the northern ridge. Estimated arrival time, 30 minutes. We need that overwatch position established immediately. Turner looked at Maria with an expression that mixed professional assessment with something approaching desperation. Specialist Reyes, I'm going to make this very simple. We have men pinned down who need long-range support in the next 15 minutes, or they're not coming home. Our designated marksman is wounded, and you've just demonstrated knowledge that suggests significant combat experience. Maria shook her head, panic rising in her throat. Major, you don't understand. I can't. Can't what? Can't shoot? Because everything you've just told me suggests otherwise. It's complicated, Maria said weakly. Then uncomplicate it, Turner snapped. Because in 30 minutes, those men may die, and you might be the only person on this base who can prevent that from happening. The weight of the moment settled over them like a physical presence. Maria looked around the logistics office at the supplies she'd been inventorying, at the 2 officers who were asking her to step back into a world she'd spent 5 years trying to escape. Her hands were no longer trembling. For the first time in years, she felt the familiar calm that had once made her exceptional settling over her like a second skin. The instinct she'd suppressed, the training she'd tried to forget, the identity she'd buried, all of it was still there waiting. If I do this, she said quietly, everything changes. Turner nodded grimly. Everything's already changed, Specialist Reyes. The question is whether you're going to help us change it back. Maria looked through the window at the helicopter. On the landing pad, its rotors already spinning up for emergency deployment. After 5 years of hiding, of being small and invisible and safe, the aircraft seemed to be calling her home. I'll need 10 minutes to prepare and a full briefing on the terrain, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all morning. Turner's relief was visible. You'll have them. Mitchell, get her whatever she needs. As the 2 officers hurried away to coordinate the emergency mission, Maria stood alone in the logistics office, staring at her reflection in the polished glass of a supply cabinet. The woman looking back at her was still small, still dark-haired, still wearing logistics fatigues. But something fundamental had shifted in her eyes, a recognition of who she really was, beneath the carefully constructed facade. For 5 years, she'd been Maria Reyes, the quiet logistics specialist who blended into the background. In 10 minutes, she'd have to remember how to be someone else entirely, someone who'd been dead to the world for over half a decade, but who had never really gone away. The hardest part wouldn't be making the shot. The hardest part would be accepting that her life as an invisible specialist was over, and that the person she'd been hiding was about to be exposed to the world. The tactical gear felt familiar against Maria's skin as she prepared for the mission. She checked the M110 semi-automatic sniper rifle with practiced movements, muscle memory flooding back despite 5 years of suppression. Lieutenant Alex Dawson, the helicopter pilot assigned to insert her at the overwatch position, watched her prepare with professional curiosity. You must be our emergency marksman, Dawson said, extending his hand. I'm your ride to the party. As they shook hands, Maria unconsciously fell into the confident posture of an experienced operator. Thank you for the lift. I know this is unconventional. Major Turner vouched for you, Dawson replied, studying Maria's demeanor. Though I have to ask, when was the last time you were in a combat operation? It's been a while, Maria said. Carefully, her eyes automatically scanning the helicopter's configuration and the surrounding terrain. Without thinking, she began cataloging details that only an experienced combat veteran would notice: approach vectors, potential landing zones, extraction routes if the primary plan failed. Dawson followed her gaze. Interesting. You're looking at this operation like someone with tactical experience, not logistics personnel. Maria caught herself, realizing she'd been performing the kind of pre-mission assessment that was second nature to Special Operations Forces. I've studied the protocols. Hard not to pick things up after 3 years. Right, Dawson said, though his tone carried skepticism. What's your assessment of our insertion route? The question should have been a trap for someone with supposedly limited combat knowledge. Instead, Maria responded instinctively. Northern approach keeps us below the ridgeline. Stay in the valley shadow until the last minute, then pop up. Just long enough to drop me at the overlook. Should keep us below visual or audio detection range from the insurgent position. Dawson stopped checking his flight plan and stared. That's a textbook tactical insertion assessment. How does a logistics specialist know about masking helicopter acoustic signatures against terrain features? Heat rose in Maria's cheeks as she realized her mistake. Training manuals, she said. I read extensively about all aspects of operations. Logistics personnel don't typically study advanced insertion tactics, Dawson replied sharply. Who exactly are you? Before Maria could answer, they reached the mission briefing area where Major Turner waited with tactical displays and drone footage of the engagement area. Captain Reed Harrison, the Quick Reaction Force commander, looked up from his maps. Our marksman, I presume? Harrison began without preamble. Alpha Team is here, in this ravine. Insurgents have established fighting positions along these ridgelines. They're effectively trapped with no clean extraction route. Maria studied the topographical display with an intensity that surprised everyone present. Her eyes tracked terrain, features, elevation changes, and potential firing positions with the precision of someone experienced in tactical mission planning. Wind patterns in the valley? She asked, her voice carrying unexpected authority. Variable, Turner replied. 5 to 7 knots, shifting direction with the canyon walls. What's the loadout for Alpha Team? Do they have smoke for concealment? Maria continued, her questions becoming increasingly tactical. Harrison watched this exchange with growing amazement. Those are fire support coordinator questions from someone supposedly pulled from logistics. Maria realized she was slipping back into old patterns, thinking like the tactical operator she'd once been rather than the specialist she was supposed to be. I just want to understand the situation completely. Really? Dawson interjected. Because you're processing this. Briefing like someone with extensive combat mission experience. When Turner displayed drone footage showing the insurgent positions and mentioned their likely tactics, Maria unconsciously nodded and began forming tactical recommendations before catching herself. You were about to say something about the enemy disposition, Harrison prompted. Nothing important, Maria said quickly, but the damage was accumulating. Dawson's expression had shifted from professional acceptance to active suspicion. Specialist Reyes, Dawson said firmly. I need a straight answer. What's your actual combat background? The room fell silent except for the hum of electronic equipment. Maria felt 3 experienced operators studying her, trying to reconcile her supposed logistics background with the obvious tactical expertise she was displaying. It's complicated, she admitted finally. Uncomplicate it, Turner demanded, because you're demonstrating knowledge that logistics specialists don't possess. Sir, Harrison added, I've been running combat operations for 10 years. I've never met support personnel who understand tactical briefings like she does. Maria looked around the room at faces that demanded explanations she wasn't prepared to give. She could continue lying and hope they'd accept the inconsistencies, or acknowledge that her carefully constructed identity was crumbling under instincts she couldn't suppress. The mission timer chimed. 22 minutes until insurgent reinforcements reached Alpha Team's position. We'll resolve this later, Turner said grimly. Right now, we have men to save. But Specialist Reyes, when we return, you're going to explain exactly who you are and how you know what you clearly know. As they headed toward the helicopter, Dawson fell into step beside Maria. "Whoever you really are, you better be as good as you seem to think you are. Because if you get us killed because you're hiding something important, I'll personally make sure they court-martial whatever's left of you." Maria nodded, understanding the weight of trust being placed in her despite the growing suspicions. As she approached the helicopter, 5 years of carefully maintained anonymity felt like it was dissolving with each step toward the aircraft that would force her to remember exactly who she used to be. The pre-flight checks were muscle memory. Her hands moved across the rifle with practiced efficiency, each component exactly where her body expected it to be. The weapon responded to her touch like an old friend welcoming her home. "Overwatch." "Radio check," came Turner's voice through her headset from the command center. "Overwatch 5x5, Maria responded, the call sign feeling both foreign and familiar on her lips. "Overwatch, you sound like you've done this before," Harrison observed over the comm as his quick reaction force prepared to move toward Alpha Team's position. Maria keyed her mic carefully. "Just trying to do my job, QRF actual." But as the helicopter lifted off and the base fell away beneath them, Maria felt the last of her resistance crumbling. The sensation of sitting in a helicopter with a precision rifle across her lap was overwhelming. Not just the physical reality of the weapon and aircraft, but the emotional weight of returning to who she'd once been. For 5 years, she'd convinced herself that this part of her life was over. Now, surrounded by the familiar sounds and sensations of a combat insertion, she realized she'd never really left it behind. She'd just been hiding from it. "Overwatch." "Command, weather conditions optimal, visibility unlimited. Wind variable 5 to 7 knots, good hunting." As the helicopter banked toward the mountains, Maria felt 5 years of Maria Reyes, the quiet logistics specialist, falling away. In her place sat someone whose skills had never truly died, someone who was about to prove that excellence doesn't disappear, just waits for the right moment to resurface. The question was no longer whether she could make the shot. The question was whether she was ready for what would happen when people discovered who she really was. Captain Lucas Grant had supervised tactical operations at Forward Operating Base Sentinel for 8 years, coordinating thousands of missions across the rugged Afghan landscape. He prided himself on reading operators through their radio communications, distinguishing nervous rookies from battle-hardened veterans, identifying the subtle markers that separated good shooters from exceptional ones. When Overwatch first contacted the command center, something in her voice made Grant pause mid-briefing. "Command, Overwatch establishing position on Northern Ridge. Requesting final targeting parameters before engagement." The transmission was crisp, professional, carrying an underlying authority that seemed inconsistent with a logistics specialist pulled for emergency duty. Grant keyed his response while signaling his communications officer. "Overwatch cleared for final positioning. Rodriguez, pull up the personnel file. I want to know who this Reyes really is." Through the drone feed, Grant observed Maria settling into her Overwatch position. While most emergency replacements would show hesitation or excessive caution, Maria moved with different precision, no wasted movement, no unnecessary communication, actions flowing with practiced efficiency. "Sir," Rodriguez called from his terminal, "this is odd. Specialist Reyes is listed as logistics support personnel. No combat certification on file. No special operations background documented anywhere." Grant frowned, keying his radio. "Overwatch. Confirm sniper qualification status for mission records." A brief pause preceded the response. "Command, Overwatch operating under emergency authorization from Major Turner." The hesitation caught Grant's attention. Legitimate combat specialists answered certification questions immediately and confidently. This uncertainty suggested something irregular. "QRF actual, confirm Overwatch's qualification status." "Command, QRF actual. Overwatch cleared for this operation by battalion command." Request immediate targeting parameters due to time constraints. Grant noted Harrison's diplomatic evasion while checking the mission clock. 20 minutes until insurgent reinforcements reached Alpha Team's position. Whatever irregularities existed would need investigation later. All elements cleared for immediate mission execution. Weather stable, visibility unlimited. As the operation began unfolding, Grant monitored the communications. What he heard challenged everything he understood about the personnel under his command. QRF Actual, Overwatch recommending communication blackout for Alpha Team, except emergency traffic. Insurgents likely monitoring standard frequencies. Overwatch QRF Actual, approved, switching to alternate channels now. Grant blinked in. Surprise. Communication security protocols represented advanced tactical knowledge that logistics specialists shouldn't possess. He'd never heard emergency replacements discuss signal intelligence with such casual expertise. Rodriguez, start recording all Overwatch communications. Full transcript required. The revelations continued as the operation progressed. Maria began providing tactical assessments that suggested extensive combat experience. QRF Actual, recommend. You hold position behind that ridgeline. Insurgents have established a crossfire zone in the approach valley. Let me eliminate their western position before you advance. Captain Harrison's response carried evident surprise. Overwatch, that's excellent tactical analysis. How did you? Never mind. QRF holding position as advised. Grant was now monitoring every word from the mysterious marksman. In 15 minutes, she had demonstrated knowledge of enemy tactics, terrain analysis, and threat assessment impressive. Even for experienced special operations personnel. The most revealing moment came when she made contact with Alpha Team's leader, Lieutenant Scott Jenkins. Alpha Actual, Overwatch. I count 17 insurgents in hardened positions along your northern and eastern flanks. Your current position is exposed to fire from the boulder formation at your 2 o'clock, approximately 300 meters. Overwatch Alpha Actual. Cannot confirm enemy at that position. Are you sure? Maria's voice cut through with precision that made Grant grab his recording equipment. Alpha Actual. Check the shadow pattern behind the largest boulder. You'll see the barrel of a DSHK heavy machine gun. They're waiting for you to move toward the extraction point. How the hell did you spot that? Jenkins responded with astonishment. That position is nearly invisible from our angle. Light. Refraction on the barrel. The angle is wrong for natural terrain features. Jenkins's amazement was audible. Overwatch, that's incredible. No one would have seen that until we were in the kill zone. Grant looked at Rodriguez, who was staring at the drone feed. Sir, whoever Overwatch is, she's not using standard optics for that identification. That level of detail at that range requires advanced recognition training and exceptional fieldcraft. Maria continued demonstrating expertise that defied her supposed background. Maria, or Carmen said quietly, it went wrong. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Here was someone who had achieved the highest level of special operations training, only to have her career destroyed by a mission. Gone wrong. You left the task force? Turner asked gently. I was extracted from my last mission with severe injuries and PTSD, Carmen confirmed. When I recovered physically, I couldn't go back to that life. I requested a new identity within the military where I could still serve, but disappear from everything that reminded me of what happened. Harrison studied the classified database entry. According to this, Operative Sierra 117 was recommended for the Distinguished Service Cross for actions during Operation Breakwater that saved multiple American lives. That doesn't sound like a mission that went wrong, Mitchell observed. The mission objective failed, Carmen said bitterly. The fact that I got some people out alive was just damage control. Turner looked up from his research with an expression of amazement. Carmen, do you realize what this means? You're not just any operator. You're Sierra 117. The Ghost, the operative who set marksmanship records that still stand in special operations. Training, I'm a washout who couldn't handle the pressure, Carmen replied. You're a legend, Turner corrected. Sierra 117 was supposed to be the future of special operations. There were reports that you'd been selected for experimental programs, classified missions that most operators only hear rumors about. Carmen shook her head. That person doesn't exist anymore. She died in that valley in Syria 5 years ago. The weight of her revelation hung in the air. They had discovered not just a hidden operator, but a legendary one whose disappearance had apparently left ripples throughout the special operations community. Turner closed the folder, his expression mixing professional assessment with human compassion. Sierra, we need to make some calls. There are people who've been looking for you for over 5 years. Please don't, Carmen whispered. I just want to go back to being invisible. That's not possible anymore, Harrison said gently. Not after today. You just proved that Sierra 117 never really died. She's been hiding in plain sight, and she's still the exceptional operator she always was. Within 2 hours of discovering Carmen's true identity, Major Turner's office had been transformed into an impromptu secure communications center. Encrypted video conferences connected Forward Operating Base Sentinel with the Pentagon, Fort Bragg, and Joint Special Operations Command Headquarters. The woman who had spent 5 years hiding as a logistics specialist was about to face the military establishment she'd fled from. Colonel William Drake appeared on the main screen from Fort Bragg, his weathered face showing a mixture of disbelief and something that might have been relief. At 58, Drake had been the commanding officer of Task Force 22 when Carmen was selected for the Ghost program. Major Turner, Drake began without preamble. Please confirm that you have Sierra 117 in custody. Not in custody, sir, Turner corrected. Specialist Ramirez is here voluntarily, though I suspect she'd prefer to be anywhere else right now. Carmen sat rigidly in her chair, still wearing the tactical gear that had exposed her identity. Facing Colonel Drake through a video screen felt surreal after 5 years of believing she'd never see her former commanding officer again. Sierra, Drake said, using Carmen's old call sign. Do you have any idea how many resources have been dedicated to finding you? Colonel, I'm not Sierra anymore, Carmen replied quietly. I haven't been for 5 years. Drake's expression softened slightly. Carmen, you disappeared after medical discharge. One day, you were recovering at Walter Reed, the next your records were classified, and you vanished from the system. We've had people trying to track you down for years. On another screen, Major Rebecca Sullivan from the Pentagon joined the conference. Carmen recognized her immediately. She'd been Carmen's training officer during the Ghost selection process. Sierra, Sullivan said, her voice carrying both frustration and concern. We need to talk about Operation Breakwater. The name hit Carmen like a physical blow. Operation Breakwater had been the mission that ended her career, the operation where everything went catastrophically wrong. Breakwater was a failure, Carmen said flatly. There's nothing to discuss. Actually, there is, Sullivan replied, pulling up classified files. The mission analysis was completed 6 months after your disappearance. The findings were classified above even your clearance level, but you need to know what really happened. That day, Colonel Drake leaned forward. Carmen, Operation Breakwater wasn't a failure. The intelligence you secured led directly to the neutralization of 3 major terrorist networks and prevented planned attacks on American soil. Carmen shook her head violently. That's impossible. We lost the primary target. Ambassador Chun died on my watch. You lost one target, Sullivan interrupted. Sierra, your decision to secure the intelligence cache instead of pursuing the primary target saved thousands of lives. The information you extracted from that compound was more valuable than anyone realized at the time. The words seemed to hang in the air without meaning. Carmen had spent 5 years believing she was responsible for a catastrophic mission failure, building an entire identity around guilt and self-imposed exile. The intelligence analysis took months, Drake continued. By the time we understood the full value of what you'd recovered, you had already disappeared into the system. Major Turner watched Carmen's reaction carefully. Specialist Ramirez, are you telling us that you've been hiding for 5 years? Based on guilt over a mission that was actually a strategic success. I got half my team killed, Carmen whispered. No, came a new voice from the speakers. Captain Lucas Grant, the tactical operations officer who had coordinated today's mission, had joined the conference. You saved lives today, just like you apparently saved countless lives 5 years ago. Grant's image appeared on screen, his expression determined. Ma'am, I don't know the details of what happened in Operation Breakwater, but I know what happened. Today, you coordinated a perfect tactical operation under hostile conditions that saved an entire platoon. That's not the performance of someone who makes fatal mistakes. Colonel Drake opened another file. Sierra, there's something else you need to know. The Distinguished Service Cross recommendation that was filed after your medical discharge. It was approved. You've been awarded the DSC for valor during Operation Breakwater. Major Sullivan continued. The citation reads, for extraordinary heroism while engaged in action against an enemy of the United States. Operative Sierra 117's decisive action and exceptional courage under fire prevented the loss of classified intelligence vital to national security and saved the lives of multiple American personnel. Carmen stared at the screens in disbelief. You're saying I received one of the highest military honors for the day I considered my greatest failure? You received a medal for making the hardest choice possible in an impossible situation, Drake corrected. Carmen, the tactical analysis of Operation Breakwater has been used in training scenarios for 5 years. Your decision-making under pressure is literally being taught to the next generation of special operators. The revelation was too much to process. 5 years of guilt, 5 years of self-imposed exile, 5 years of believing she was a failure, all based on incomplete information and survivor's guilt. Sierra, Drake said gently, we've never stopped looking for you because the program needs operators like you. The kind of operator who can coordinate a perfect tactical mission while operating completely alone. The kind who can make 4 impossible shots in succession to save an entire platoon. Captain Harrison, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Colonel, today's mission performance suggests that Operative Sierra 117's skills haven't deteriorated, despite 5 years away from tactical operations. Her precision and tactical awareness were exceptional. That doesn't surprise me, Drake replied. Sierra was always exceptional. The question is whether she's ready to stop running from who she is. Carmen looked around the room, faces, both familiar and new, all watching her with expressions that mixed professional assessment with human compassion. For 5 years, she believed she was hiding from failure. Instead, she'd been hiding from commendation. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, Colonel Drake said, we give you a choice. You can return to your logistics position, and we will respect your decision to remain there. Or you can consider that maybe it's time for Sierra to come home. The weight of 5 years of hiding pressed against the possibility of redemption. For the first time since 2018, Carmen began to consider that maybe she'd been wrong about everything. The secure conference room at Forward Operating Base Sentinel had become a crossroads between Carmen's hidden past and an uncertain future. Colonel Drake's offer hung in the air like a challenge she wasn't sure she was ready to accept. Colonel, Carmen said slowly, you don't understand what the last 5 years have been like. I've spent every day believing I failed my team and my country. I've built an entire life around the certainty that I was a liability who didn't deserve. To be in the field. Major Sullivan leaned forward on the screen. Sierra, we have the complete mission. What if 5 years of hiding has broken something essential? Yesterday, you saved 12 men's lives and completed a perfect tactical mission with no preparation time. Turner replied, if that's what broken looks like, the military could use more broken operators. He opened the folder, revealing official orders with the seal of the Department of Defense. These are transfer orders to Fort Bragg. You'd be reinstated at the rank of captain, the rank you would have held if you'd never left. Your assignment would be to lead the Sierra Initiative. What's the Sierra Initiative? Turner smiled. A program they created after you disappeared. They've been identifying and training operators with your combination of tactical innovation and field instincts. 8 operators over the past 5 years who show similar potential to what you demonstrated. They call them the Ghosts. The irony wasn't lost on her. While she'd been hiding from her identity as Sierra, the military had been building an entire program around the legend she'd tried to escape. They wanted you to come home, not just to operate again, but to mentor the next generation of tactical innovators, Turner continued. To teach them what you learned through instinct. Carmen thought about the previous night, when she'd called her brother Miguel in Texas. Miguel's words echoed in her mind. People don't lose that kind of talent, Carmen. They just convince themselves it's gone because it's safer than risking failure again. There's something else, Turner said, his voice growing serious. Wells is still active duty. He's been promoted twice since you left, and he's currently an instructor at the training center. Your returning to service would mean potentially working in the same community again. The mention of Wells sent a familiar spike of anxiety through Carmen's chest, but this time it was accompanied by something new resolve. 5 years ago, I let him drive me away because I believed his lies about my capabilities, she said slowly. I convinced myself that leaving was protecting other operators from my failures. But the real failure was letting one man's jealousy destroy something I'd worked my entire life to achieve. Turner nodded. Colonel Drake mentioned that there might be an opportunity for you to address Wells' conduct officially. His pattern of undermining promising operators apparently didn't end with you. Carmen stood up, decision crystallizing in her mind. Major, what would happen if I said yes? You'd report to Fort Bragg in 2 weeks. Captain's insignia, command of the Sierra Initiative, and access to the classified programs that would let you help design the future of special operations. She walked to the chapel window, looking out at the mountains where just days ago she'd made the shots that saved Alpha Team. For 5 years, those mountains had represented all the places she'd convinced herself she didn't belong. Now they looked like challenges waiting to be overcome. The operators in the Sierra Initiative, she asked, are they good? They're exceptional, but they've been developing in isolation, trying to recreate innovations you pioneered naturally. They need someone who can teach them not just the techniques, but the mindset that creates tactical breakthroughs. Carmen thought about Lieutenant Jenkins, who had shown such courage under fire, about all the operators who might benefit from training that could save their lives in combat situations. There's one condition, she said finally. Name it. I want a full review of Wells' conduct toward junior operators. If he's been doing to others what he did to me, it needs to stop. Turner's smile was grim. Colonel Drake anticipated that request. The investigation is already underway. Carmen turned back to face him, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt like herself again. Not the broken operative who'd fled in guilt, not the invisible specialist who'd been hiding, but the tactical innovator who'd once set records in special operations training. Major, Sierra is ready to come home. 6 months later, Captain. Carmen Sierra Ramirez stood on the training grounds at Fort Bragg, watching her Sierra Initiative operators prepare for their final evaluation. The Carolina sun beat down on the field, just as it had when she was 25, but everything else had changed. Sierra Control, Phoenix team ready for final assessment, came Lieutenant Alex Dawson's voice through her headset. Dawson had requested transfer to the program after their mission in Afghanistan, saying he wanted to learn from the operator who'd impressed him so much during the rescue operation. Phoenix team, Sierra Control. Carmen responded using her official call sign as commander of the program. Today's scenario will test everything you've learned about adaptive tactical thinking. Remember, there are no perfect solutions, only solutions that work. Through her binoculars, Carmen watched 8 operators move into position around the complex training facility. Each represented months of intensive training that had transformed promising soldiers into tactical innovators capable of redefining special operations doctrine. The exercise was a complex multi-threat scenario that had been deemed impossible by conventional training standards. Carmen had designed it specifically to force her operators beyond traditional thinking, the same approach that had been used to challenge her years ago. Sierra Control, Phoenix 1 requesting permission to brief tactical modification. Dawson's voice carried the confidence of an operator who'd learned to trust his instincts. Phoenix 1 approved. What's your assessment? Sierra Control, recommend splitting team into 4 elements instead of 2. Use vertical and horizontal separation to create overlapping fields of fire while maintaining stealth positioning. Carmen smiled, recognizing the innovation. Dawson had just developed a tactical solution that improved on standard doctrine, exactly what the Sierra Initiative was designed to achieve. As the exercise unfolded, Carmen found herself watching the next generation of tactical innovators discover their own capabilities. Each operator was pushing beyond what they thought possible, developing solutions that would eventually become standard throughout special operations. Colonel Drake's voice came over the radio from the observation tower. Sierra, Joint Special. Operations Command has reviewed the Sierra Initiative's first 6 months of results. They're impressed enough to expand the program to include operators from all service branches. The implications were staggering. What had started as her personal redemption was evolving into a transformation of how the military developed tactical excellence. But the most satisfying moment came near the end of the exercise when Carmen received a secure communication from the Pentagon. Sierra, this is Colonel Drake. I thought you'd want to know Major Wells' investigation concluded yesterday. He's been relieved of duty and will face disciplinary action for systematic harassment of junior operators. 8 operators have come forward with stories similar to yours. Carmen closed her eyes, feeling a weight she'd carried for 5 years finally lifting from her shoulders. Wells would never again be able to destroy a promising operator's career through jealousy and manipulation. Sierra Control, Phoenix team mission complete. Dawson's voice brought her back to the present. All objectives achieved through adaptive tactical employment. Phoenix team, Sierra Control, outstanding execution. Return to base. As the operators reassembled, Carmen reflected on the journey that had brought her from a logistics office in Afghanistan to commanding the military's most advanced tactical training program. 5 years of hiding had ended with the acceptance of responsibility she'd always been meant to carry. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her brother Miguel in Texas. Saw the news about the Sierra Initiative. Dad would be proud. You're finally using your gifts the way he always said. You should. Carmen looked up at the Carolina sky, remembering her father's words about gifts coming with responsibilities. For 5 years, she'd hidden her talents because she was afraid of failure. Now she understood that her greatest contribution wasn't individual achievement, it was empowering others to achieve greatness themselves. The quiet logistics specialist who'd hidden at Forward Operating Base Sentinel no longer existed. In her place stood Captain Sierra, ready to lead the next evolution of special operations into whatever challenges awaited. As the sun set over Fort Bragg, Carmen walked toward the shooting range where her own rifle waited, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, New innovations and new opportunities to prove that excellence doesn't disappear. It just waits for the right moment to resurface. The woman who had been cleaning her rifle just 6 months ago, before taking the shots that saved an entire platoon, had found her true calling. Not just as an operator, but as a leader who could transform the special operations community from within. 1 week later, Carmen stood before the 8 operators of the Sierra Initiative in a secure briefing room. Their faces reflected a mixture of anticipation and respect. They'd all heard the rumors about their commander's legendary past. "Before we begin today's training," Carmen said, her voice steady with newfound confidence, "I want to share something with you that took me 5 years to learn." The room fell silent, operators leaning forward slightly. "Each of you was selected for this program because you demonstrated exceptional potential, the ability to think beyond conventional tactics, to see solutions where others see only problems. But potential means nothing if you don't believe in yourself." She moved to the front of the room, making eye contact with each operator in turn. 5 years ago, I let someone convince me that my greatest strengths were actually weaknesses. I believed that my willingness to make difficult decisions in impossible situations was a liability rather than an asset. I ran from who I was because I was afraid of failing again. Carmen pointed to the mission board where their upcoming training operation was outlined. "The most dangerous threat you'll ever face isn't enemy fire. It's the voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough, that you don't deserve to be here. The voice that says your instincts are wrong when every fiber of your being is telling you otherwise." She picked up a spent rifle cartridge from her pocket, the one from the shot that had saved Alpha Team 6 months ago. "This represents the moment I stopped running. One shot that reminded me who I really was, who I'd always been, even when I was pretending to be someone else." Carmen placed the cartridge on the table where everyone could see it. "Each of you will face moments that define you, moments when you have to decide whether to trust your training and instincts or surrender to doubt. In those moments, remember that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite your fear." Lieutenant Dawson spoke up. "Captain, how did you know you were making the right call that day, when you took those shots at that extreme range?" Carmen smiled. "I didn't know. I could calculate the variables: wind, distance, elevation, but in the end, it came down to trusting that the skills I'd spent years developing were still there, even after I'd tried to bury them." She moved to the tactical display, activating it with a touch. "That's what this program is really about. Not just developing your skills, but teaching you to trust them, to believe in yourselves even when circumstances seem impossible." Another operator, Sergeant Rivera, raised her hand. "Ma'am, we've heard the stories about what happened 5 years ago, how you were pushed out of the program unfairly." Carmen nodded, appreciating the directness. "Yes, and for 5 years I let that injustice define me. I let someone else's jealousy and insecurity determine my worth." She looked around the room at the operators who represented the future of special operations. "I'm sharing this with you because each of you will face obstacles in your careers, some from the mission, some from within the system itself. When that happens, remember that your value isn't determined by someone else's assessment. It's determined by what you know you're capable of." The room was silent, every operator absorbing her words. "The hardest battle I ever fought wasn't in some distant country against an enemy with a weapon. It was the battle to reclaim my own sense of purpose too. Remember that the skills I possessed weren't diminished by someone else's attempt to undermine them." Carmen moved to the door, preparing to lead them to the training ground. "Today, we're going to run the most challenging scenario this program has ever attempted. You'll face impossible odds, contradictory intelligence, and rapidly changing conditions. You'll be forced to make decisions with incomplete information and limited resources." She smiled confidently at her team. "And you're going to succeed, not because I'm telling you that you can, but because each of you already possesses the capabilities you need. My job isn't to create those capabilities. It's to help you recognize them in yourselves. As they filed out toward the training ground, Carmen felt a profound sense of purpose that had been missing for 5 years. The shots she'd taken to save Alpha Team hadn't just rescued 12 men. They'd rescued her from the prison of doubt she'd built around herself. The quiet logistics specialist who'd been cleaning her rifle that morning in Afghanistan would have never imagined standing here, leading the military's most elite training program. But that specialist had never truly existed. She'd been a cover for the extraordinary operator, who had been hiding in plain sight all along. Sierra hadn't just come home. She'd returned to create a new generation of operators who would never doubt their own capabilities, who would understand that true excellence isn't about never failing, but about rising stronger each time you fall. As she watched her team deploy across the training ground, Carmen finally understood the truth that had eluded her for 5 years. Sometimes the most important person you need to save isn't on the battlefield. Sometimes it's yourself. The girl who'd been afraid of her own capabilities had become the woman who taught others to embrace theirs. And in that transformation, she'd found not just redemption, but purpose. Sierra was home. And this time, she wasn't going anywhere. Captain Aaron Chun had supervised special operations training at Fort Bragg for 12 years, evaluating thousands of operators through the most demanding scenarios the military could devise. He prided himself on recognizing exceptional talent, distinguishing technical proficiency from true tactical genius, identifying the subtle markers that separated good operators from those who would change the future of warfare. When the Sierra Initiative first arrived at his training facility, something about their commander made Chun pause during the initial briefing. Razor Actual, Sierra team requesting permission to modify the standard training parameters, came. Captain Ramirez's calm voice through the command center speakers. The transmission was precise, authoritative, carrying an underlying confidence that instantly commanded respect. Chun keyed his response while signaling his executive officer. Sierra Actual, modifications approved pending review. Lieutenant Wilson, pull up Captain Ramirez's full service record. There's something familiar about her tactical approach. Through the facility's surveillance system, Chun observed the Sierra Initiative team preparing for the day's exercise. While most training units moved with standard military precision, Sierra team operated differently, more fluid, more adaptive, each operator seeming to anticipate the other's movements without explicit communication. "Sir," Wilson called from his terminal, "this is unusual." Captain Ramirez's record shows a 5-year gap. She was reportedly serving in logistics until 6 months ago, but before that, most of her file is classified at levels even we don't have access to. Chun frowned, studying the training ground monitors more carefully. "What about her operational history?" "That's the strange part, sir. According to accessible records, she has none. She transferred directly from logistics to command of our most advanced tactical program with no transitional assignments. But her performance metrics since taking command are off the charts." Chun watched as Ramirez briefed her team. Her movements, the way she gestured toward terrain features, the precision of her tactical language all suggested someone with extensive field experience, not a former logistics officer. "Run a deeper search," Chun instructed. "Cross-reference with special operations databases. Use my clearance codes." As the Sierra team began their exercise, Chun monitored their communications with growing fascination. Within minutes, it became clear this was unlike any unit he'd ever observed. Phoenix 3, shift 15 degrees east. Wind patterns changing through the valley. Phoenix 1, target cluster identified. Permission to modify approach vector. Granted. All elements adapt to conditions. Remember, see the battlefield as it is, not as you expect it to be. The operators moved through the complex training scenario with a fluidity that defied standard doctrine. where conventional teams would establish fixed positions and communicate through established protocols. Sierra teams seemed to flow across the terrain, adapting instantly to changing conditions. "Sir," Wilson said urgently, "I found something. When I used your clearance codes, the system triggered a security protocol. Someone's contacting us directly." The main screen in the command center switched to a secure video feed. Colonel William Drake's weathered face appeared, his expression both serious and slightly amused. "Captain Chun," Drake began without preamble, "I see you're running searches on Captain Ramirez." "Colonel Drake," Chun responded, recognizing the commander of Task Force 22. "Yes, sir." "Her team's performance is unusual. I'm trying to understand." "Her background," Drake nodded. "I expected this would happen eventually." "Captain, what you're witnessing is the Sierra Initiative, a program built around tactical methodologies developed by Captain Ramirez during her previous service." "Previous service?" Chun questioned. "Her record shows logistics work." "Her cover record, yes," Drake clarified. "Captain Ramirez's actual operational history is classified above your current access level. However, given your role in evaluating her team, I've been authorized to provide limited information." Chun leaned forward as Drake continued. "The operator you know as Captain Carmen Ramirez previously served under the call sign Sierra 117. She was the most accomplished operative in a highly classified program, developing next-generation special operations capabilities. Her tactical innovations revolutionized our approach to asymmetric warfare." The revelation hit Chun like a physical shock. Sierra 117 was a legend in the special operations community, a near-mythical operator whose exploits were whispered about in secured briefing rooms. "Sir, with respect, Sierra 117 disappeared 5 years ago after Operation Breakwater. The official record indicates—" "The official record is intentionally incomplete," Drake interrupted. "What you're seeing now is Sierra 117 rebuilding after 5 years of, let's call it recuperation. The Sierra Initiative is her creation, a program to develop operators who can implement her tactical approach." Chun turned back to the monitors, watching Captain Ramirez with new understanding. The fluid movements, the intuitive tactical adjustments, the seamless coordination. He wasn't watching a former logistics officer. He was watching one of the most accomplished special operators in military history. "Why tell me this now, Colonel?" Drake's expression grew serious. "Because tomorrow the Sierra Initiative will face the Gauntlet." The Gauntlet was the military's most challenging tactical assessment, a multi-day exercise that pushed operators beyond conventional limits. In 12 years, Chun had never seen a team completed with a perfect score. "You need to understand who you're evaluating," Drake continued. "The Sierra Initiative isn't just another training program. It represents the future of special operations. Captain Ramirez isn't just teaching tactics. She's creating a new generation of operators who think beyond conventional parameters." Chun nodded slowly, understanding the implications. "What exactly should I be looking for, sir?" "Don't look for anything," Drake advised. "Simply observe without preconceptions. What you're about to witness will change how you understand tactical operations." As the communication ended, Chun turned back to the monitors with new perspective. He wasn't just watching a training exercise. He was witnessing the resurrection of a legend and the birth of something entirely new in military capability. The next morning, as the Sierra Initiative prepared to face the Gauntlet, Captain Chun approached Carmen directly for the first time. "Captain Ramirez," he said, extending his hand. "I wish you luck today, though something tells me you won't need it." Carmen studied him carefully, noting the subtle shift in his demeanor. "You've been briefed," she stated rather than asked. Chun nodded. "Colonel Drake thought it would be helpful if I understood who was really running this program." "And do you?" Carmen asked, her gaze direct and challenging. I understand that Sierra 117 was considered the most innovative tactical operator in special operations history, Chun replied. What I don't understand is why someone with your capabilities disappeared for 5 years, only to re-emerge training a new generation. Carmen looked out across the training grounds where her team was preparing. Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find your purpose, Captain Chun. 5 years ago, I forgot who I was. 6 months ago, I remembered. Before Chun could respond, Lieutenant Dawson approached with the final equipment check. We're ready, Captain. The team is prepped for all gauntlet parameters. Carmen nodded. Remember what we discussed. The gauntlet isn't about following procedures perfectly. It's about adapting when those procedures fail. As the Sierra initiative moved toward the starting position, Chun activated his link to the command center. All monitoring stations active. Full recording of all Sierra initiative movements and communications. What we're about to witness may redefine our understanding of special operations capability. The gauntlet began with a preyed-on infiltration exercise. Most teams approached it methodically, establishing security positions, advancing in coordinated movements, maintaining standard communication protocols. The Sierra initiative took a completely different approach. Instead of moving as a unified team, they separated immediately, each operator flowing through the terrain individually, converging and diverging like water finding its path downhill. Their communications were minimal short phrases, sometimes single words, occasionally just sounds that somehow conveyed complex tactical information. Phoenix 2, Shadow Shift. Acknowledged, 3 Harness, Flow Pattern, Somehow. These cryptic exchanges coordinated perfect tactical positioning. The operators seemed to read the environment and each other's intentions instinctively. In the command center, Chun watched in amazement as the team bypassed obstacles that had stopped other units for hours. Where conventional doctrine called for established solutions to tactical problems, Sierra teams seemed to invent new approaches spontaneously. Sir, Lieutenant Wilson said, studying the monitoring equipment, their movement patterns don't match any established tactical doctrine. It's like they're creating a new language of operational movement. That's exactly what they're doing, Chun replied. Captain Ramirez isn't teaching them conventional tactics. She's teaching them to think beyond tactical constraints altogether. The most revealing moment came during the hostage rescue scenario, traditionally the most challenging element of the gauntlet. The exercise presented an impossible situation. Multiple hostages in separate locations, overwhelming opposition forces, and a compressed time frame that made conventional approaches unworkable. Most teams were forced to prioritize objectives, inevitably sacrificing some elements of the mission. The Sierra initiative approached it differently. Phoenix team, mission parameters fundamentally flawed. Carmen's voice came through the command center speakers. Conventional solution impossible. Reframe the problem. Chun leaned forward, watching intently as Sierra team implemented a solution that had never been attempted in the gauntlet's history. Instead of treating each objective as separate, they created a cascading sequence of actions where each movement simultaneously addressed multiple mission elements. The operators moved in patterns that seemed chaotic until Chun recognized the underlying structure. They weren't executing separate tactical maneuvers, but creating a single flowing operation where each action set up possibilities for the next. In 37 minutes, they accomplished what other teams had deemed impossible, extracting all hostages, neutralizing all opposition, and securing all objectives without a single simulated casualty. Wilson struggled for words. That's not possible. Apparently it is, Chun replied, if you stop thinking in terms of conventional tactical limitations. As the gauntlet continued through its increasingly difficult scenarios, the Sierra initiative demonstrated the same fluid adaptability. They didn't solve tactical problems, they transformed them, approaching each situation with a fundamental creativity that made standard doctrine seem rigid and limited by comparison. By the final day, when most teams were exhausted and making critical errors, Sierra teams seemed to be gaining momentum, their movements becoming more synchronized, their tactical innovations more impressive. The culminating exercise, a complex extraction under overwhelming enemy pressure, had never been completed successfully. The scenario was deliberately designed to force teams to accept partial failure, testing their ability to minimize losses when complete success was impossible. In the command center, Chun watched with dozens of senior officers who had gathered to observe the unprecedented performance of the Sierra Initiative. Even Colonel Drake had arrived to witness the final evaluation. Sierra Actual, all elements. In position, came Lieutenant Dawson's voice through the command center speakers. Conventional approach assessed as non-viable. Understood, Phoenix 1, Carmen replied calmly. Implement watershed protocol. Chun turned to Drake. Watershed protocol? That's not in any tactical manual I've ever seen. Drake smiled slightly. That's because Captain Ramirez created it last week. You're watching tactical doctrine being written in real time, Captain Chun. What followed was unlike anything in the history of the Gauntlet. The Sierra team executed a series of synchronized movements that deliberately revealed their positions to draw enemy focus, then exploited the predictable response patterns to create opportunities that shouldn't have existed. Where conventional doctrine emphasized concealment and security, they used apparent vulnerability as a tactical advantage. They didn't avoid enemy contact, they shaped it, channeling opposition responses into patterns that created extraction possibilities. In 22 minutes, they completed an exercise designed to be impossible, suffering 0 simulated casualties while extracting every high-value asset from the operational area. The command center fell silent as the exercise concluded. Dozens of senior officers stared at the monitors, witnessing the completion of the Gauntlet with a perfect score, something that had never happened in its history. Colonel Drake turned to Chun. Now do you understand what the Sierra Initiative represents, Captain? Chun nodded slowly. They're not just elite operators. They're a completely new approach to tactical operations. They don't think in terms of established doctrine at all. Captain Ramirez doesn't teach them what to think, Drake explained. She teaches them how to think. The difference is transformative. As the Sierra team returned to base, Carmen found herself surrounded by senior officers eager to understand how her team had accomplished the impossible. She answered their questions patiently, explaining the underlying principles rather than specific tactics. The fundamental limitation in tactical operations isn't physical capability or equipment, she explained. It's conceptual. We artificially constrain ourselves by approaching problems through established doctrinal frameworks. The Sierra Initiative teaches operators to see beyond those frameworks to recognize that the true battlefield exists first in the mind. Later that evening, alone in the quiet of her office, Carmen reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been hiding in a logistics office, denying her true capabilities. Now she stood at the forefront of a revolution in special operations. Her phone buzzed with a message from Colonel Drake. Joint Special Operations Command has reviewed today's performance. The Sierra Initiative is being expanded immediately. Prepare to select 30 new candidates. What you've created is changing everything. Carmen smiled, remembering the moment 6 months earlier when she'd been cleaning her rifle at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, never imagining that within hours she would take the shots that would not only save Alpha Team, but reclaim her own identity. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Captain Chun entered, carrying the folder with the official Gauntlet assessment. Perfect score, he said simply, placing the folder on her desk. In 12 years evaluating special operations teams, I've never seen anything like what your team accomplished today. Carmen nodded her thanks, but Chun wasn't finished. The technical evaluation doesn't capture what I really observed, he continued. Your team didn't just complete the Gauntlet. They fundamentally reimagined how tactical operations can be approached. You've created something revolutionary. Not created, Carmen corrected gently. Recognized. These capabilities exist in every operator. They're just constrained by conventional thinking. I simply help them break those constraints. Chun studied her with newfound respect. When you were cleaning that rifle 6 months ago, did you have any idea you would end up here? Carmen smiled at the reference to her emergence from hiding. 6 months ago, I believed my greatest contribution was behind me. I thought hiding my capabilities was protecting others from my failures. She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the training grounds where her team was celebrating their achievement. What I've learned since then is that our greatest obligation isn't to protect others from our failures, it's to share our capabilities so they can discover their own. Every operator out there has the potential to transform how we approach impossible situations. They just need someone to show them it's possible. Chun nodded thoughtfully. And that's what the Sierra Initiative really is, not just tactical innovation, but a fundamental belief that perceived limitations can be transcended. Exactly, Carmen confirmed. 6 months ago, I took a shot that everyone thought was impossible. Because in that moment, I stopped believing in limitations. Every operator deserves that same freedom, the knowledge that what seems impossible is often just unexplored. As Chun left, Carmen turned back to the window, watching her team. In them, she saw not just the future of special operations, but a reflection of her own journey from self-doubt to empowerment. The logistics specialist who had been cleaning her rifle that morning in Afghanistan had believed her greatest days were behind her. The captain who now led the military's most innovative tactical program understood that her greatest contribution was just beginning. 1 month later, Carmen stood before a room of 30 new candidates for the expanded Sierra Initiative. Their faces reflected a mixture of pride at being selected and uncertainty about the unorthodox program they were entering. "Before we begin," Carmen said, pacing slowly before them, "I want to tell you why you're really here. It's not because of your physical capabilities, your marksmanship scores, or your past accomplishments, impressive as they may be." She stopped, making eye contact with each candidate. "You're here because someone recognized in each of you the capacity to see beyond conventional limitations, to question assumptions that others accept without thinking." Carmen picked up a rifle similar to the one she'd been cleaning that fateful day. 6 months ago, I was hiding in a logistics office, denying my own capabilities because I was afraid of failure. When crisis forced me to take action, I discovered that excellence doesn't disappear. It waits patiently until we have the courage to embrace it again. She placed the rifle on the table. The Sierra Initiative isn't about teaching you new tactical maneuvers or specialized equipment operations. It's about helping you recognize that the most powerful weapon you possess isn't in your hands, it's in your mind. Carmen activated the room's display system, showing footage from the gauntlet exercise. What you're seeing isn't just tactical proficiency, it's freedom from conceptual constraints. My team isn't better than other operators because they're stronger or faster. They're more effective because they've learned to question fundamental assumptions about what's possible. She turned back to the candidates. Each of you has experienced moments where you intuitively knew a better approach existed, but conventional doctrine pulled you back to established methods. The Sierra Initiative will teach you to trust those insights to explore tactical possibilities that exist beyond the boundaries of conventional thinking. A young lieutenant raised his hand. "Captain, with respect, how do we know when to trust our instincts versus following established protocols that have proven effective?" Carmen smiled. "An excellent question. The answer is that we don't separate the two. Established protocols exist for a reason. They represent collective wisdom gained through experience. The error is in treating them as limitations rather than foundations." She gestured toward the training grounds visible through the windows. "Over the next 6 months, You'll master every conventional tactical approach in our doctrine. You'll understand why they work in the situations they're designed to address. Then you'll learn to see beyond them, to recognize that true tactical mastery isn't about following protocols perfectly, but knowing when and how to transcend them. Another candidate spoke up. "Ma'am, we've heard the stories about what you did in Afghanistan, 4 impossible shots that saved Alpha Team. Was that skill or something else?" Carmen considered the question carefully. It was both. The technical skills were essential: understanding ballistics, reading wind conditions, maintaining positioning. But the decisive factor wasn't technical proficiency. It was the willingness to attempt something beyond conventional parameters when the situation demanded it. She looked around the room at the operators who represented the future. Each of you will face moments where following established doctrine leads to certain failure. In those moments, your greatest asset won't be what you've been taught to do. It will be your capacity to envision what others believe can't be done. Carmen moved toward the door, preparing to lead them to the training grounds. Today begins a journey that will transform not just how you operate, but how you understand your own potential. 6 months ago, I was cleaning a rifle, believing my greatest contributions were behind me. That belief was my only true limitation. She smiled confidently at her new team. The Sierra Initiative isn't about creating exceptional operators. It's about helping you recognize the exceptional capabilities. You already possess capabilities that conventional thinking has taught you to doubt or suppress. As they filed out toward the training area, Carmen felt a profound sense of purpose. The shots she'd taken to save Alpha Team hadn't just revealed her hidden identity, they'd revealed a path forward for special operations that transcended conventional limitations. The quiet logistics specialist cleaning her rifle that morning could never have imagined standing here, leading the military's most innovative program. But that specialist had never truly existed. She'd been a cover for the extraordinary operator who had been hiding in plain sight all along. Sierra hadn't just come home. She'd returned to create a new vision of what was possible, a future where operators understood that perceived limitations often existed only in the mind. As she watched her new candidates spread across the training ground, Carmen finally understood the truth that had eluded her for 5 years. Sometimes the most important mission isn't the one you're assigned. Sometimes it's the one you discover when circumstances force you to remember who you really are. The woman who had been afraid of her own exceptional abilities had become the leader who taught others to embrace theirs. And in that transformation, she'd found not just redemption, but a legacy that would transform special operations for generations to come. Sierra was home, and her greatest contributions were just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.